Iris, welcome back to the program. How are you?
I'm just great.
We're talking with Iris Stevens. She's the coordinator for the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party. I wanted to have you in because City of Jonesboro trying to pass a sales tax on the people. They've now called, officially, it's called a special election for the beginning of September. What's the exact date on that?
September the 10th.
Okay.
We need everybody to come out and vote.
All right, so September the 10th, special election. You're just backed into school. Everyone's getting settled down, and you got to remember to go vote now. So obviously that's by design. Matter of fact, we're going to be talking on Thursday with Jeremy Horpendahl from the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, specifically about his special election paper and how the data just shows that if you want to get a tax increase passed, you do it not in a primary, not in a general, but in a special election, because that's when the people are not paying attention.
That's right.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think, that's very obviously why they're rushing this through in the middle of summer, because I've talked to several of my friends who didn't even know this was going on because they're out of town. Some of them taking trips to Europe. Some of them taking trips around the country. They're not paying attention to politics or even local politics.
Yeah.
And that's what the designers of this hope, that they can get their people out the way they packed them to the city council meetings. They're hoping they can pack the election and get, all of the four people there where everybody else is going, what's going on? We don't even know about this.
Do you think the process has been as transparent as it needed to have been?
Absolutely not. I think it's one of the most terrible things that we've seen. When you have city council members say, we're not here to litigate this, when people come up, with problems that they have with it, that's exactly what they're there to do. Tell me what other measure ever is just run completely through the city council and put on a ballot after 3 readings, very little controversy, very little discussion about it, because it's a people's measure. They run it through there. Roger Kidd, who spoke at the city council meeting, really, he said, can you name one other situation like this? What if a group of people wanting to celebrate a charity wanted the city to pay to paint every city building pink? Would you do that? Would you just run it through a ballot? Because I don't know of any other situation, and this shows the amount of support that it has with the city council. And if you go back, if you have attended the meetings, if you go back and look at the videos or read the transcripts, you can see the support. They've had it all along. It was basically a done deal from the time it was brought up.
Do you think that some of the kind of predetermined result the city council has, do you think it has to do with the fact that if they don't get this extra tax increase, this full cent, that they're going to have to start seriously looking at making some budget cuts because, they've been eating into the surplus money?
I think that's a possibility. I don't follow enough of that, but I have heard people talk about it, that's a possibility, which is what is one of the concerns that we've had voiced from some of the other people. Is this money just going into the general fund and then we use it to spend for other things, and then they tack on a few projects that they have? I think it's interesting that some of these projects have been in the works for a while. Mayor Perrin at the second meeting, I think it was, full city council meeting where it was the second reading, it may have been. Maybe it was the first reading, but anyway, he actually made the point that they've already basically set up for these bicycle and pedestrian trails, and they've already essentially allowed for $140 million of bicycle and pedestrian trails. That alone would bankrupt the 1% tax that they're talking about. That alone, and of course they'll say, well, but
by how much?
Well, they'll get $110 million because, see, half of the tax goes to police and fire, and half of it goes to the amenities, or the
over
quality
12
of life.
Years, though, right?
For 12 years, but that's what they're counting on, is about $220 million.
Over a 12-year period.
Right.
Yet they've got one project slated to cost $140.
Well, that's, they'll say that, well, not all of that will be this, or we'll add in. So I'm not saying that, they're only going to do bicycle trails. I'm just telling you what those kind of numbers add up to be.
Well, if you look at the, quote, grassroots Team Jonesboro on their website, they want project needs, quality of life projects. Aquatic center, senior citizens facility, volleyball, basketball, sports complex and tournament complex, a tennis facility, youth firearms training and sporting facility, bike trails, phase 1 down to Arkansas State, senior citizen center, tennis courts, north side pool and or park upgrades, dog parks, forum theater renovations. Area pocket parks to include flood mitigation. Downtown park to include flood mitigation. Enhanced mosquito control. Downtown amphitheater. Bike trail phase 2. Children's museum. Sidewalks. Let's see here. And then they've got police and fire. Fire station, police, fire communication upgrades, everything else. It just, that's a lot of stuff to a lot of people.
It's something for everybody, and that's deliberate. Because if you see something on that project list that you really like, you're far more apt to vote for it than you are if you don't see anything on there. And that's guaranteed to make, I get what I want, so I'm for this.
Well, they're consolidating minority constituent groups is what they're doing. Because if you just, not a lot of people ride bikes and want bike trails. And so if they were just saying we want a tax increase for bike trails, it would be essentially, hey, this is the majority of us paying for a minority's hobby, a very small minority.
That's exactly what it is.
But then, you throw in youth firearms. Okay, now you got a lot of guns. Now you got a lot of people. So the bike people and some people who want the government to build them a shooting range,
which is already under construction.
Yeah, and then they claim a senior citizen. So now you're gonna have older people.
Everybody gets something.
So but I don't know. I don't see how in the world they do all this stuff.
Okay, that's the problem. That is where it's not transparent. And we don't know if before we go to the polls, because I have not seen that anywhere, and people have asked over and over, will we have, before the voting date comes out, will we have a specific list of these are the projects that we're going to do with a price tag attached to each one? And that's pretty much the way that I function in my household. When I go to give somebody money, I know what I'm giving it for and how much it's going to be. And that's what I think the vast majority of voters expect in this issue. They want to know before they ever go, not to go to the poll and see on the sheet that you have, the ballot, it's going to be this, and I don't even know at that point if there would be figures attached to it, if it would just be a list of projects.
What I would, I think most people would expect the government has a responsibility to tell us what the money specifically will be used for.
Exactly.
That's how government works.
Well, it should. It should. But this has seemed clouded in, I don't know, just the desire to get it done. Let's push it through, and give everybody a list of things that they think they want, and that we might be able to do 12 years from now.
But why do this without showing the people specifically what it's going to go to?
We haven't been able to get that in.
At least with police and fire, we can at least categorize that. We know what a policeman does. We know what fire people. So, we know the money's going to go to that. Okay. All right.
Well, the city council itself said they didn't want to give a list because that would stifle the creativity of the committee doing it. We don't want to. And the Scott McDaniel, the representative for this, said, that would give us a floor and a ceiling if we let people know. Well, I'm sorry, that's the way government works.
Yeah,
it should work.
Yeah, that's the way that's the way budgeting works. You would never do this if this is not how an individual would run their household. No, and let me take out a loan and not really know what I'm gonna spend it on. No one's gonna do that.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's what the government does a lot of times.
Yeah.
Just, in tax increases. Has been the least transparent part of this entire process.
Well, let's talk. Okay, we're talking with Ira Stevens, the coordinator for the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party, and she is, we're facing this tax increase in Jonesboro. Let's talk about Fayetteville for a second, because this comes up with a lot of these Team Jonesboro people. They're comparing Jonesboro to Fayetteville. Obviously, the competing universities have something to do with that. I don't know if some people in Fayetteville may not acknowledge that, but people in Jonesboro certainly do, growing up here all my life. Now, can you compare the two, honestly? In
there
terms
are a lot of comparisons. Bobby Long, who's a city council person, has done a pretty good study of the comparisons. Some of it's not very flattering to Fayetteville. They took out an issue, and I've actually got the materials, what they spent it on, and they spent on a lot of, infrastructure and needed, what we'd consider necessities. And then they had the bicycle trails and the amenities and things. But here in January, they had this one for 12 years.
Yeah.
they did it through a bond issue.
So Fayetteville has essentially,
Yes.
they're paying for bike trails
Yes.
via bond issue.
Yeah. And in April, I think it was April of this year, they did a special election to, I don't know how you say, reissue those bonds so they could continue, and they had a list of projects that also continued the amenities things. But keep in mind, Fayetteville also does not have to spend the amount of money Jonesboro would, because they've gone and they've petitioned Walmart and Tyson and Jones and the large corporations that are in that area to help pay for it. And I think I mentioned the last time I was in here, they got $74 million from Walmart for bike trails, over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's something else that has never been mentioned in this, even though I think some questions have been asked. Where have you looked for corporate sponsorship for some of this stuff? Like an aquatic center that would benefit, kids and things. Why aren't we looking for corporate sponsorship of something like that?
Some of the corporations around here that have employees that
exactly. And once they've done that due diligence, say we've got X amount of money coming in from corporate sponsorships, we've got this money we're considered bonded, all of that. But no, this has been rushed on, this summer through a special tax or special election, which has its own problems. We've talked about that. We can't even get the amount that the last special election cost Jonesboro. The property maintenance code.
Yeah.
So we contacted the city. They didn't have that figure.
Let's actually go back to that real quick. Tell our listeners across the state and online about the property tax maintenance code and what happened with that, because you guys petitioned to have a special election to. Go ahead, tell us.
Well, the city council passed a really overreaching property maintenance code in the fall of, I think it was 14. And, they had a lot of people saying, no, this is wrong, because it was almost like a communist takeover of your property. Of course, they'll disagree with me, but that's the way we saw it. We took their own property code and we determined that this needed to be shut down. And we took it out with petitions and got enough petitions with signatures once they read the code, which, of course, the city didn't really want people to know about. All the little things were in it.
It was a template. It was International Property Maintenance Code.
Exactly.
I remember this, and their excuse was, there's some oppressive things in here.
But we won't do it.
We won't enforce it.
Yeah, we won't enforce that.
Okay, you
exactly.
clearly don't know anything about it. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And they had focused on renters, on landlords. This would take care of landlords not keeping their property up, but the code itself took care of every residence, every building in Jonesboro. It was private, it was rental, it was business property, and most people did not know that until our group went out and collected signatures, and we handed them the code. Said, read this and see if you think this is a good idea. And when it came to an election, we got enough signatures for election. When it came to election, it was defeated like 2-1.
Yeah.
Because people actually had the information that this wasn't what the city had said it was.
Right. So I just wanted to bring that up because I wanted everyone to know this isn't the first time that the Jonesboro City Council has acted and then been rebuked by the population. There's another opportunity to do this again.
Yes.
They are
and
now.
say if you want these kind of projects, you make it open and above before all of this happens. Say we need an aquatic center, we need this and that, because I don't think most of us are against some of the individual projects. It's the way this has been done, and I think it's been hidden. And they talk about an integrity committee that's going to be open and transparent, but yet. In a lot of the materials before they actually passed, the city council moved it onto the ballot. There wasn't any transparency. It was basically you show up to vote, and then we'll tell you what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. I wonder. I wonder if there is kind of I wonder if they realize how conservative. Let's just say Craighead County. It really stands out if you look at the last several elections and voting cycles. In Republican I think they voted with Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. I think that Craighead County voted for Ted Cruz.
I think so, originally, yeah.
Originally.
But then they went heavily for Donald Trump when he was on the ballot.
I just meant.
They are very conservative.
Yeah.
And that's one of their concerns is they understand, and I think it's amazing. Two of our editors of the local paper, and so often they are all for any of these measures, but two of them have expressed concern about this. One of them just came out and said, I'm not sure that we need a tax for this. They think that there should be impact fees from developers that should take care of a lot of this stuff. He said, one of them said, we're overtaxed anyway, or we pay plenty of taxes. And let's not tell him that, but I considered sending him an invitation to the Tea Party because we're the Taxed Enough Already group.
Yeah.
And then the other editor who made the point that, we've got serious problems coming up with Craighead County Jail and, detention center, and we're going to have to do something about that. And he said, I can see down the road where we get to have another tax or a tax measure on that.
It's funny you mentioned that. We were interviewing, again, comparing, Jonesboro and Fayetteville. Washington County, okay, they have a jail crisis too. And I was interviewing Justice of the Peace Patrick Deakins over there last week, and he was saying, basically saying how much they had to fight not putting a tax on the ballot. And so, it's very possible that that's exactly right, and that all of these local governments. And I went over this at the very beginning of the show this morning, Iris, how there's always a reason to not fight a tax increase from the argument of, well, don't you know this politician, isn't he such a nice guy? So, for example, like if you had somebody at the federal level who was pursuing, let's say, a national sales tax, it's like, we got to fight this. But then you get somebody that, comes up to me and is like, hey, don't you know that Congressman so-and-so is such a nice guy? I know him personally, and, don't get so personal. It's like, well, we're just opposing a tax and telling people that this person's for it. And this is all hypothetical. And then it's like, okay, fine. Well, then that tax passes. And then you get down to the state level, and it's like, hey, state representative so-and-so is for this tax. Telling me, hey, don't get so personal. I'm just against the tax policy. And then it's like quorum court. And by the way, the more local you get, the more you can't say anything about somebody because they're a pillar of the community. They might have done X, Y, and Z. That's
you don't
really good.
even have to. All you have to do is say, he's my best friend. But I'm not for this tax, and he knows that I'm not.
A lot of times it's like, well, he's my Sunday school teacher or my neighbor, and so,
we've personalized
just give him
every
what he
difference
wants.
of opinion.
Yeah, difference of opinion means a personal attack. And that's what's going on here with the whole idea of Team Jonesboro, too, by the way. If you're not for a tax, I guess you're not for Jonesboro.
And, that's all PR and the names that they choose and everything.
Correct,
and the next time we talk, we need to talk about who's supporting them and the amount of money that they've gotten and the Chamber of Commerce, because, I want to get into that at some point, but maybe not today.
Okay.
But Chris Wessel, one of the editors, he even made the point with this county jail, the detention center. He said, you can't go to the taxpayer well too often. That's a paraphrase.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. And part of that's created from the state. When we have a 6.5% sales tax at the state level, that doesn't give an awful lot of swingway for individual local areas to raise taxes, because we're already, the third heaviest tax. And this tax in the country. Yeah. And this tax in Jonesboro would raise us to the highest anywhere around. And I mean, that even goes beyond Tennessee's, which I think is like 9.46. They're the highest in the country of combined state and local sales taxes. That would put us up beyond them. Yeah. And people need to think about that, because it's 1% over 1% over. Pretty soon you're talking real money.
Yeah, and Tennessee doesn't have an income tax.
And no income tax.
Yeah, that's something to think about. Iris Stevens, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. Appreciate it. We'll keep saying on this. When's the vote on that?
September 10th. Put that on your calendar. We need everybody, the way for or against, get out and vote.
Yeah, get out and vote. September 10th, right as people are coming back to school, or they've been back in school for a little while. You got to pay attention, folks. Normally, people know that you only vote two times in a cycle. Now you're going to have to vote in a special election, so you're going to have to tell everybody to get out and vote so that we get a more accurate slice of the consent of the governed. And that's what a special election is designed to prevent, by the way. We want the largest cutout possible of the people to vote. Special elections are done to stifle the will of the people. And the evidence is overwhelming. The statistics are overwhelming to support that. I actually think, personally, special elections, when it comes to getting the consent of the governed, are not ethical. And unless it's an emergency to have an aquatic center, then there shouldn't be a special election. Now, if a tornado comes through, okay, call one, but that's not what we're dealing with here.